Thank you so much, Aaron. And please forgive my exhaustion. I'm submitting my default tomorrow. So I've been working day and night. In fact, I'm rather exhausted. But it's so wonderful to be in the presence of incredible poets, and also, of course, to see you, Aaron. I haven't seen you for a very long time. And I'm going to read from Eating the Archive. But just to clarify a couple of acronyms. The first one is the UN, United Nations. The second one is UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Works Agency. So this book returns, I would say, again, to my home camp, to my home refugee camp, Baddawi camp in North Lebanon. And what I'm trying to do is to see how rations, in fact, can be reassembled and recreated, but also reconfigured in language, but also in essence and substance. So these rations that were normally gifted, and they sustain us in these camps. And I'm going to begin with Time is a Swelling, and just to mainly to, in fact, to remember certain times, or glimpses, in fact, of times with my mother, but also with those in the camp. The past, out of all times, is what can be seen in eyes long gone. To see the past as a happening in its jade. My mother would carefully sift our UN gifted grains, the dry for us and the hovering bits for birds that never were. What we ate was what she planted in secret under her pillow, remains of nothing in the shape of distant prayers. I was not alone. My mother with a cane and poor eyesight was to my right, nothing to our left. Now I hold her by the hand like a drifting sound, heart to heart, throat to throat, to walk together. Bodies hung in thin air, the sweat of old age and time, suspended returns to the eyes that once saw. You say to the clock hung adjacent to all religious things in the room, my time is a swelling, my mother's yeast for the aged bread left aside as a proof for time. Nothingness, hide not in imagination, nor ascend the psalms of night. What is left for you and me is the suspicion in suspicion. When the sky is just a crow, with air raids as infinite as their ruins, the body's task is to ponder its body. Here, in this place, people ascend to normality on crutches. A body alone feasts on the body. I shall imagine my tongue drowning in languages that are not mine, so as to speak in water. Seeing is the thing's substitute. What is deferred in seeing is the thing for its only time. To pretend not to see what is amassing in your hands while you carry a heart barely attached to your body. To pretend all is well for once while they prod you in the back to remind you that it is time to look. I ask a question for me. what it is in writing that has no such thing as a present, but is written, solely written for a future subject to many pasts. They would normally write their names in a graphite, so they would rub them out and rub them again and write them again as names for suspected names. I begged her to take me with her. Then I could see what she could do to her eyes in wakes, tears. In the aftermath of tears, her veil slowly unraveling, two loose ends caressing my grandmother's dead face. What the eyes could see was not all. They were many, some carrying what they could in haste, sponge mattresses, plastic bags stuffed with memories, children on backs and in slings. It was in the dead of night when almighty shrieks were heard, as recounted by my mother. It was my father who first ran to find out. When he returned, the sweat pouring down his face and elapsed body, he uttered no words. Instead, he pulled the bed sheet over his face to sob alone. Whose eyes are forever stones, tears are gifts to the blind. The bird that lost its way in the camp was chased by screaming children until it was lost again. The same bird was not announced dead. For it to become permissible to eat, it is to be slain in the future. In poetry, the wound is continuously postponed. The second poem, the title is The Table, is also premised on the window frames that are gifted to us, in fact, by the United Nations. Of course, they also gift us the concrete, they gift us the cement, and then you sort of build your own place. So we have this chronological but also material progression in the refugee camp from the tent to concrete houses. And the title of this poem is The Table. And I'm going to start with a line, in fact, from Tom Pollan's From. You've made a table, you say, and are happy. The nails are deep in the flesh, different shapes and sizes, rusty heads bent, recitations for a job well done, prayers for wood elevated to the body, for the cross in the backyard. What he made for my mother, who spent her years giving birth to 11 heads, one after the other, different shapes and sizes. From wooden slats, once an old window shared with the neighbors, those hands hurt no soul, meeting through the net, clutching when darkness falls. Honor were replacing the wood, but not the window, the holy net. He dismantled every hole to make fragments. Then, with an axe splitting sounds into further sounds, rendering cracks into noise, uneven legs for a body, nails protruding, crucifixion, assembled, elevated, the feast that never was. This poem revolves around how writing, but also writing with and co-writing, is a sort of discreet, I call it, act of solidarity, especially with my parents. My father passed away 2 years ago, and of course, he's buried in the camp. And sometimes we wonder whether, when this camp is no more, and what's going to happen, in fact, to our dead. So these are, in fact, existential concerns which are related to not just to memories being transferred from one place to another and displaced, but also how we tend to render memories in memories for the coming silence. And these are fragments, just individual, I call them sentences. Through the colander, water leaves and never leaves. Face is a mere direction. Guide me, O face, to my face. Rocking is noise, sacrificed for the coming silence. Suddenly I think of who I am to remember memory in memory. In my hands is a prophecy, for I am a poet. I follow in my footsteps to the hereafter. Sorrow is but the body replete with its own silence. The tree cut for fire is still burning in my heart, whether in speech or in sex. Inside the mouth lies another mouth. Is not that wailing in language the wailing of the body over its body? Yousif, the name I see in black, the transliterated version of the name, almost as it pronounced in life by the mother, as archived by the strangers with the slit tongues, the name that appears and disappears in equal measure, the one guarded, unarmed. In wars, a trembling makes the body, and not the other way around. I say to fear, whatever you do it to no one. The gun I cradled when my mustache was barely there was that of a dead person whose blood was still fresh on the strap. For what it is, sense only loses itself in the tangible. What my father held then was the shrapnel protruding from his own flesh. When the war started, fighter jets, low and high, all gathered on the doorstep bearing a bundle of our things. Staring back at the door, my father said, let's go and die in bed. He taught me how to peel an orange in one go, one long peel with two beginnings. And back also to UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, but also on living. In the Communist Party headquarters, where my father and eldest brother were members, the only pan used for frying eggs and cooking was a piece of metal cut from a box where weapons were once kept. Then I was too young to come to terms with death, and to see death in a light that could be slightly less dim than ours, to toughen me up and expose me to as many dead faces as he could. My brother would drag me along all the funerals he could get hold of. While he was busy chattering, I guardedly unloosened the shroud wrapped over our grandmother's body. The first time I held a gun, was when I decided to shoot time at close range. After school, or after school, when all visitors had finished with us and the camp, I would ascend to the Jebel to play with the friends. The Jebel was not a mountain, but the arid stretch of land outside the camp, where hiding from air raids and the sky was never possible. There are a few bomb shelters in the camp. Some are requisitioned as houses. Some remain buried under the UNRWA schools. The rest are for the future. And I'm going to conclude with a poem, in fact, dedicated to my sister. And it talks sort of subtly, I would say, about sensing the beginning and the end, in fact, at the same time, through two words: hair, which is covered because she wears the headscarf, and the word, in fact, for poetry in Arabic. And these two words, hair and poetry in Arabic, in fact, look identical without the short vowels, because they stem from senses and sensing. The hair, my sister, I shall write the stitch on your veil, yours before mine, a pact between us, a text we hide in hair and poetry, in multiply donned letters, free of diacritics, like our shared quilt. Thank you.